Welcome to Camera Shake Podcast, episode 120, 120. That's the podcast where we talk about photography, videography, and anything that's got anything to do with any of that. And let me just say that up front, if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, rest assured that there is a fully fledged, coolly colored version, video version over on YouTube. So if you're that way inclined, hop over there. That would be interesting. Now, today we have a guest on the show, but let me just tell you, I am so happy that we managed to connect again because it's been a while. He's been on the show again pretty much exactly a year ago, I think. It's pretty much exactly a year ago. Now, it is none other than the Photoshop and InDesign guru, educator, podcast host, author, and the man who used to live literally 2 streets down from me. Get up for Mr. Dave Clayton. Dave, how's it going, man?
All right, mate. It's nice to be back on. Wow, is it really a year?
It's been exactly a year. It was actually the week before the photography show.
Of course it was, yeah, because we met properly at the photography show and hugged it out and got a beer mat.
Absolutely.
Got a free beer mat.
What?
Worth it just for that.
More beer mats coming this year for sure.
Good.
Awesome. Man, it's been, I tell you what, I literally drove past your old house the other day.
Really?
On my little Vespa.
God, that seems a lifetime ago. I worked out actually, for anybody who cares, because this is a boring bit, that it would have been my 30th from that relationship, that house, it would have been my 30th wedding anniversary last week.
Wow.
Had all of that worked out fine.
Yeah.
And it was crazy to think that was 30 years ago. And yet, like, my memories of Rickmansworth and Mill End and Croxley Green is just still doesn't feel like that long ago. Like, where's the time going?
How long ago did you move away from here?
I moved from Rickmansworth. I moved back to Croxley Green, and then I think I moved up to Leicestershire. I think it was around 1994. I bought a house up there,
right.
And that was like the second, like the job that I had while I was in Rickmansworth was like the first time I got to use a colour computer, a colour photocopier, and the first time I'd seen a Mac and Cork Express. Then when I moved up to Colville, the job I had there, we shared the office with a Swedish company. And this guy had a colour computer in his office, and he had a copy of PaintShop Pro. And he used to let me stay behind after work and learn to use PaintShop Pro. And the first picture I ever did, I've said this story before on another podcast, but the first he said, okay, you can stay in my office for an hour every night, and you can use my computer until I leave. But in return, you have to do a job for me. And he gave me a photograph, and his son was in the Swedish army, and it was a picture of a red sports car in the foreground. His son was then standing you got the car in the foreground, then he was standing probably about 6 feet away from the car, and behind him was the helicopter that he flew. But on the bonnet of the car, just sat back on the bonnet of the car with arms folded, was his girlfriend. And it's a really cool photo. I just wish I'd kept a copy of that. And but they'd split up, and the dad, whose name was Bo, said, "I want you to take her out of the photograph for me. I just want a picture of a sports car, my son, and the helicopter." And this was like pre-select subject, and it was literally copy paste, dodge, blur, cut paste, cut paste, cut paste, cut paste, cut paste, just little pieces, and I had no other source in that image other than what was there. And I'd love to see it today, because when I showed it to him, like the night I finished it and I finessed it, and I was trying to get some like hard edges on the bonnet, and like flipping the headlight from one side to the other, get the proportion right. And I remember leaving it on the screen, and he walked in and was like, getting towards the end of my time to go. And the whole time I had the picture on the screen without her in it. And he was chatting to me. And I won't swear, but he just suddenly looked down at the screen, and the penny dropped, and he went, "Oh, effing hell, this is magic." And that was my first proper retouching job. on Paint Shop Pro. And after that, I was like hooked. I was like, wow, I can do this. So I always remember that time there, because that was my first opportunity to do graphical kind of retouching, as it were.
I tell you, my first time that I've retouched anything, or that I've kind of composited something into another image, I remember it well too. It was on a very early version of Photoshop. This must have been 1998, 99.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, so very early, whatever. I don't know whether it was Photoshop 3 or whatever it was. It was before the CS versions. And so what I did was I went to London and I took a picture of the IMAX theater. And then I had a Dalmatian at the time, a dog. And I had a picture of the dog. And I shot both images on like a super early digital camera, which is probably like 0.1 megapixels or something like that. You know? And so I placed the dog in the scene, like on the street in front of the IMAX theater, and I tried to make it look like it was really there. Of course, you look at that image now and that doesn't look anything.
It looked like it was floating, far too big in proportion.
yeah, exactly. All the shadows were on the wrong side. Yeah, terrible. Like big fringing around. But at the time it was like, whoa, wow, that's awesome. Like, what the hell,
Do you know, every job after I did that particular one, it's funny, like when you speak to these great designers and they go back and they're like, oh yeah, I remember my first job was working for Pentagram in their post office, and I got to work with Paula Scher, and they tell these amazing stories of like life was so wonderful. Like, oh, my first job as a musician, I was roadie for Jimi Hendrix. They've always got these great stories. It's like, no, mine started off taking a girl out of a photograph and then spending probably the next 3 years basically replacing famous people's faces with my friends, family and work colleagues' faces for every event possible. Oh, can you make my dad Bobby Moore from the 1966 World Cup? Can you make my daughter the princess from so-and-so? And literally that was my work for 3 years, just replacing faces. But I still learned techniques, but it was just funny back then, like how you've kind of take it for granted now how good the software is, that you forget, unless you're of a certain age and was using older version, that how laborious it was to make something look good.
And I tell you what, actually, I mean, there's, it seems like things are really speeding up at the moment as well, with Photoshop's neural filters, for example, stuff like that. There's some incredible stuff. Like the other day, actually only last week or the week before, I did a job in London where, as part of the job, I shot but 18 headshots, basically. And the typically I would go in and I would retouch each individual headshot, obviously, and I could outsource it, whatever, but typically in the past, that's what I've done, And of course, with these kind of team headshots, it's very different, a different level of retouching from let's say, like a corporate headshot or, a CEO or something like that, obviously. But, you'd still do the full works. I mean, you still clean up the skin, you do a little bit of, like skin smoothing and, and that sort of thing. But with the neural filters, that turned into a matter of seconds. And I just can't believe how quickly I managed to get through 16 headshots, just to sort out the skin, the face, and everything else. It was, it was mind blowing. I mean, it really took a whole massive step out of my retouching process. Automated. And the best thing about it really is that you can still, especially if you layer it, you can still sort of decide the level of intensity that you want that effect to, so you basically retouch the skin, it smooths it, cool, you bring it back, and then you kind of go, maybe that's gone a little too far, I'm just going to dial that back. And it's literally, you just move one fader. And that's it.
I think as well,
beautiful,
to give you credit there, it's like we were talking about audio off air, which maybe we'll discuss, but that retouching process where you've saved time, that's because your image is good to start with. If you'd shot that in a dark room, poor lighting, it'd still be faster, but you probably wouldn't get as good. Whereas you've done most of the work already, you're kind of fine tuning it. The thing that when I teach now, whether it's Photoshop or plugins or anything, the one thing I stress to anybody that's watching is, like, because of the job we do, we're very, very lucky that, you know, we're not in the middle of the motorway digging ditches. We get to just use our hands, a mouse, and we're in a nice location. You know, and it's hard to be taken seriously as a creative because you're kind of not manual labor. So our time, we kind of have to prove our time all the time. It's like, do we charge an hourly rate? Do we charge a job rate? You know, are you paying for the output, or are you paying for the input? But when you find a tool that takes you time, so say you're working with a customer, you do a bunch of 10 headshots, and you know that each headshot is at least an hour. You know that aside from taking the photographs, you've got 10 hours of retouching, which is billable time. So when you get a plugin or a tool that brings that time down to 1 hour instead of 10 hours, never let the customer know that you can do it in an hour, right? Because because the reason being is because the customer knows what the output is. They don't need to know what the input is. And if they're happy with the cost you've agreed, being able to do that 10-hour job in 1 hour has freed you. I'm doing the easy maths, but you can now do it now. You've got 9 hours you're billing for, which isn't dishonest, because you shouldn't be charging by the hour. You should be charging by the job. That 9 hours, you can now kind of mentally park to one side, because there's going to be a job that's going to be the opposite, a job that you thought would take an hour and it's taken 3. And that's where law of averages comes in, and you just need that little bit of extra freedom. Whereas if you kind of tighten it down to the hour, to the minute, when something goes wrong, you haven't got the flexibility. So I say to everyone, as soon as you get a plugin, a tool, whatever, don't let the customer know.
Exactly. But the other thing is, of course, you can also produce extra value, and this is often a thing, that goes along. Like, you give a little bit, but you get the proceeds in return. A good example would be, for example, I had a shoot that I did earlier this week, and one of the issues was that so it's basically a work portrait session, promotional shoots for a website. And the talent that I shot in full work uniform were basically placed in front of a wall with documents in the background. That's what the client wanted. They wanted this office environment, and I wanted this particular thing. It was blueprints or whatever else, stuff in the background. That's what they wanted. Then when they got the shots back, and they were really happy with the shots, but then say, in the high-res versions, you can see a little too much information of the stuff that's in the background, and then they basically asked to, for that to be slightly blurred, and that's all fine. Typically, that would be outside of the brief. Typically, for extra retouching work, I would have to charge extra. But in this particular case, I literally had so much time in the can that I could just say, yeah, absolutely no problem. Tell me exactly which shots you want, and I'll do that for you. Don't worry about it. You got it. And, of course, what that means is, like, from a customer experience point of view, it's like, ooh, okay, awesome. That's great.
Added value.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I already know that I'll be working with that particular client, in the future, because they're already, like, super happy, and they're already, like, thinking about the next, future projects coming up. So, sometimes you can do this balancing act where you can basically say, like, okay, I saved some time here, but therefore I can give some extra.
Exactly. Yeah. It's your time to play with, and that's why it's that thing. Don't tell them all the things. Don't be super, super open and honest, because it's just, that I like, if like I've had a job and I've had a situation where I did something extra for a client, and I just thought, actually, it's a nice thing to do. Hey, look, I thought this might be useful, so I just did this for you, and then it gives you extra work. But it's just that feeling of you feel great about the job because you've saved some time, but the other thing as well is what a lot of people don't realize is, as creatives, we spend money on subscriptions and plugins, and these things cost money. And we want to factor that back into our business to kind of to build back. So, I say to people, if you're going to buy a plugin or a tool, like say you're going to buy Topaz or you're going to buy On One or something, Luminar, one of those is going to give you a photographic extra, then look at the customers you've got and the pricing that you've got for your jobs and just see if you can get the cost of what you've paid for into your next job. So whether it's a subscription or whether it's a one-off payment, I would factor the cost of something into a job. So kind of that one job's paid for it. I've not got the stress of, and I'm talking about if you earn money from what you do. If you're a hobbyist, it's harder to justify. But even, hobbyist photographers still go and buy every lens and every light and 7 cameras. And, so when it comes to software, it's funny how, they'll drop £1,000 on the lens, but then I've got to give Adobe £10 for Photoshop and Lightroom every month.
Yeah, no, D5 about what?
Yeah, I've got to give £120 a year for the best software to make my pictures look great. No.
Yeah, no, I'd rather spend £1,500 buying it outright or £2,000. Like, really? You would?
Yeah, okay. Right. I remember those days.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it's the same. I mean, it's the same with like Windows Office. Not that I use that at all, but, I just recently I had to buy a Windows, I don't even know what it's called now, like Microsoft Office 365 or something.
Yeah.
You started at secondary school and she needs it. So I said, no, I don't want to pay for this. Yeah, you got to do it. I'm okay. But yeah, I mean, it's one of these, the thing is, I had an interesting discussion actually, only the other day, with a friend of mine who's a really talented photographer. But he's a hobbyist. That's what he does. His real job is in IT and, he enjoys going out, shooting and, shooting, what does he do? Like birds and landscape, sort of thing, He's a fellow Nikon shooter. And I was talking to him just before I pulled the trigger on the Z6 II that I just recently bought. Because, I know he's had the camera, he's got every freaking Nikon body under the sun.
Right.
Including the Z9. So, and the same with lenses. And the thing is, he said to me, like, oh yeah, do you really want to get, that glass and that lens and whatever? And, so I'm like, look, I mean, if I was doing this as a hobby, then okay. But the reality is every piece of equipment I buy, every time I replace a camera body, every time I buy a new lens, I have to see a way for that thing to make the money back somehow, So I won't buy anything that won't make me any money.
Yeah.
So for example, a good example is, when we talk about lenses, 24-70 for all you photographers out there. It's like the central workhorse of everything that I do. I don't use it exclusively, but I use it for virtually 85% of what I do, excluding headshots, although I do use it for some portrait stuff.
Yeah.
But, it's a great lens when you're doing, when you're doing on location stuff, it actually works really well for video. In fact, I'm filming myself with it right now. It's a great lens for just general all-round stuff, interiors, blah, 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 this and any other. So it's a super useful lens, and that's the lens, that's my money maker. That makes me money, every time.
Yeah.
The other thing is like an 85 prime lens, for headshots. I love the lens. I've shot more headshots. I've sold more headshots that were shot with that lens than anything else, I think. So also, that lens is like a 350, maybe 500-pound lens or something like that. That's made me the money back times and times and times over.
Yeah.
Like I don't need to buy, a 105. If I did product shoots, yeah, absolutely. I don't do product shoots.
Right.
If there was a job coming in or a string of jobs coming in that required me to do product shoots, I would think about it. Maybe I would hire one actually for this particular job just to keep the cost.
Yeah.
Because people tend to forget that. And I think hobbyists never consider hiring.
No.
As a professional, you have a job coming in, you need some extra gear. Yeah, you hire stuff in, and of course you pass the higher cost on to the client. It's part of the job.
Yeah, exactly. But and you'd get to learn as well. You get to learn your capability with that because I could easily buy. I mean, I was even looking at a keyboard this week. A friend of mine, Jay, really good designer. If you on Instagram follow him, he's called Barnard Co. And James had this keyboard from Logitech. Now I've got a Logitech keyboard because I can run 3 computers off it. So I just hit 1, 2, 3, and I got my work one and my 2 main computers here. But it was this kind of mechanical, old school, clunky key one, and the keys had specific icons on them for graphic designers, so you could set up shortcut keys on it. And I just loved the sound of it. It's all clunky, and I went on Amazon, and I think it's like £65. And then he showed off the Logitech MX3, I think it is, mouse, because I've got a black Apple mouse. And he was going, it's so ergonomic. It's really easy to use. When you charge it, the cable goes in the front, not underneath, like the dead mouse that Apple does. And I looked at that. It was £95. So I thought, well, actually, that'd be quite cool, that keyboard, £65, put it in my basket. Oh, that'd be quite a good mouse, put it in my basket. And I never buy things straight away. I leave them in my basket for a couple of days and then go back. And then it was, I don't need this keyboard. I don't need to spend I can afford £65 spent on a keyboard, but I don't need it because I've already got a keyboard. Where's it going to go? My office space is at a premium already. And then the mouse, it was like, well, I'm moving away from a mouse and using my Sense Labs tablet more, because previously when I had another tablet, I found I wasn't using it that often. And because the amount of work I'm doing is tablet usage, now I have my Sense Labs out and it's just like using that all the time. So I didn't need a £95 mouse that I wasn't going to use. I was just going to buy it because I wanted to own it, because I wanted to have the option. But it was like, no, this is silly, because whilst I've done a job that I could take that £95 out of, that £95 I'm not going to earn back from that at all. So I'm a little less carefree and a little bit more business head now when I look at gear, because I think over the time that I'll own it, because that's the other thing with gear, and less so with software, because you can do it. But I always think with gear, like I bought a Mac Mini. My iMac was old, 7 years old, and I thought, I'm going to get this new M1 Mac Mini. So I went on Amazon. I had some offer for it, and I could pay for it like over 4 or 5 months interest free. So it kind of broke it down to, I think, something like £140 a month. And at the end of 5 months, I'd have paid for the Mac Mini. And I just looked at it as, not that I'm spending this amount of money on a Mac Mini, like, oh, I've just dropped this on a Mac Mini, or I've just dropped this on a Mac Studio. I always think, okay, my iMac costs me £1,200. So in dollars, $1,200, because the exchange rate is so poor at the moment. But that iMac lasted me 6 years. So I divide that 6 years by the 1,200 and then look at what my iMac cost me per year rather than what the outlay is. So I try and break all my equipment down into 12, 24, 36. Like, this tablet should last me 3 years without having to change it. This Mac Studio should last me a good 5 years if it behaves and the software doesn't get too heavy. So I divide the cost. Now my Mac Studio is no longer a £2,000 computer. It's divided by 24.
Yeah.
I'm rubbish at maths. I'm not going to do it. But it becomes, what's that costing me per month?
Yeah.
How much do I earn a month on the jobs that I do? It's paid for.
And yeah, and the thing is, like, if you think of that, if you break it down like that and you think of that as a subscription payment, for example, like, let's say, for instance, take an iMac as an example, you break that down, into 36 months, maybe 64 months if you think it lasted 6 years or whatever. And then you think, like, would I be prepared to, pay that amount of money in a subscription on this piece of equipment, and would that be worth it? And usually you come up with such minuscule amounts that you go like, yeah, of course it would be.
Yeah.
So, that's the thing. My old MacBook Pro, this is like a running joke on this podcast. My old MacBook Pro is a 2011.
Mine is.
Yeah, MacBook Pro. I've beefed it up. I've got an SSD thingy in it. Yeah. And like I've changed this and that, more RAM and whatever else. I've maxed it out. Okay, fair enough. So I spent another, I don't know, 400 quid on it over the 10 years that I've had it.
Yeah.
But I've used that until about maybe 2 years ago or something. I used that for all of my editing work, both photo editing and video editing. And it just took forever to render and everything else, but you get around that. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
And it was really, I tell you what made me buy an iMac in the end was actually that I found I had neck pain, like in the back of my neck.
Yeah.
And so I was told it had to do with posture, so I had to work on my posture, and so basically I had to change the way that I was sitting.
Yeah,
and
not like
down,
but
yeah.
up.
So yeah, exactly. So when you're editing on a laptop, you could lift the laptop up on your desk and all the kind of
doesn't work.
Really, yeah, in reality, what you actually do is you sit on the couch, in front of the telly, and you do editing, whatever it is, and even if when it's just on the desk, you're always hunched over it and you're always looking down, and that's really what did my sort of neck muscles and my shoulders. And when I decided that it was time to replace that MacBook and to buy an iMac with a beautiful big 5K screen, and I set up my editing space behind me, so it was like a comfortable space that I like to sit in, because that was the thing. I think the main difference for me was that I thought, like, oh shit, now if I don't edit on a laptop anymore, then I'm stuck in one location. I can't move around easily anymore. And so I thought, like, oh, I have to create a space that I like being in. So and that was actually at the beginning of the pandemic. I remember I had time. I had to do all that stuff. And really, it's done wonders. I mean, not only is it much better for my eyes, to edit on this thing, but like all of my neck pain, everything else gone.
Yeah.
Posture is much better. I actually enjoy it more. I'm not as stressed out and tired after like a long editing session, for example.
Yeah.
Then that in itself, to me, was more valuable than the fact that this thing is faster and it can do X, Y, and Z and all the crazy stuff that it can do. I mean, to me, really it actually had an impact on my health, ultimately. And so, I thought that's I don't even remember how expensive it was, but I spent several £1,000s on this thing.
Yeah.
And I think that was a piece of equipment that was totally worth it.
Yeah.
And
the other thing as well, which people like, in fact, one year, the company I worked for, I complained about this so much that at the end of the year, they had an awards ceremony, and they bought me a gift, and they got me up to give me the gift, and it was an inflatable beach ball, because I kept complaining that the Mac at work was so underpowered that all the stuff I had to create, it just kept beach balling because it couldn't cope.
Nice.
So I was like, bloody beach ball, and it's all people could hear me say. And that's the reason why I upgrade my hardware. Now, obviously, I'm saying Apple because I've been in the Apple ecosystem since I found a receipt the other day, and it was 1990. It's early 90s. Sure, it's right. When I bought a Mac G4 from a place in Wickham, great big beast. But yeah, it would have been early 90s. And it's again, like with cameras, you get to a point where, like, the iMac, the hard drive went. So I then my friend Chris Fields, brilliant Mac guy, just go to him and say, what's CHNO? Look him up, people, because he's Chorley Wood. He's near you.
Oh,
yeah. And Chris put an SSD in for me, but it's an external one. So we've mounted it on the outside because he said taking the front of the iMac off was not going to be good. And to be fair, since I'd then bought my Mac Mini because I thought, my main computer's died, I want to go for the M1 because I want it to be able to cope with the amount of work I do with Premiere Pro, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. I'm one of those people that has everything open all the time. And the iMac actually sped up. But I made my Mac Mini my kind of main day-to-day, and I made the iMac my recording machine. But as soon as I start to find more time lost waiting for the beach ball, So when people say, oh, we spend 7 years yawning and we spend so many years scratching our bum and we spend 8 years of our life farting. Yeah, they do. I think, how much time did designers lose waiting for the rotating hourglass or the beach ball? And that's when I think, mentally, it's driving me mad. I'm like, I want to put my fist through the screen. It's not the screen's fault. I want to throw the computer out the window because it's like beach ball, but why can't you cope? So mentally, it's not good for me to have that stress while I'm working because I'm trying up, maybe up against the clock or I've got a deadline or something. I don't need this, and then I don't need it crashing. So I'll upgrade my gear to cope with the amount and quality of work that I'm doing. And then where possible, I'll sell the old gear. So like my Mac Mini is relatively, it's only just over a year. So I'm selling my Mac Mini. I've kept my iMac. It's under my desk because my daughters are going to need a computer before too long. I've already given my 13-year-old my old MacBook Pro, which is 2011. And she's still using it. She uses Illustrator and Photoshop on it. Admittedly, the thing is with gear nowadays is because the software is so powerful, there comes a point where the software outlives the hardware and the hardware outlives the software. So, I can't run Creative Cloud 2022 on my old MacBook Pro 2011. It's just not made to run on a machine that old. Equally, when your computer kind of runs out and dies and you go to the shop and you buy the brand new Mac Studio, it's not going to run Creative Suite 2 because the Creative Suite 2 was, so you have that weird thing of sometimes you're forced to upgrade your hardware because of the software, or sometimes you're forced to upgrade the software because of the hardware, because you have to get that happy medium. So the thing why I love, one of the things why I do like using the Apple gears is I've not touched a Windows machine in so long. I couldn't tell you the last time I used the Windows machine, like 6 or 7 jobs ago. And I've got nothing against Windows. It's just using the Mac, I find my Mac gear lasts a long time and it rides along nicely with the operating system and the software. So I try not to upgrade unless I have to. And I always know Glyn tells a story about Zacharias, and he said he only buys a new camera when he's outlived his current camera. When his current camera can't do the things he needs to be able to do, that's the time to put it down and buy the new one, not just buy it for the sake of buying it.
And that's exactly what I've done with the Z6 II. It's I shot, as many listeners of this podcast will know, I've shot my beloved Nikon D750. I don't know. I mean, ever since it came out, what is it, like 8 years or something like that? I love this thing. Exactly. And I'm still using it as a backup. It's still in my bag. I use it as a backup. It's perfectly fine. It works fine. I mean, it's, in terms of shutter count, it's come to the limit. It's dangerous now, I think, when you take it out on a job because, it's a DSLR. There are moving parts. You never know. But, it's, I got to the point where I needed it to do more, especially on the video side. And so that's really what tipped my thinking, to like splashing out. But I tell you what, I just had a great idea for a drinking game.
Go on.
Seeing that, no doubt we'll see each other in a few days' time at the photography show. we should take like a super old, like the 2011 MacBook Pro.
Yeah.
And do something like super taxing, like run something super taxing on it. Every time we see a beach ball, it's a shot.
Yeah, my MacBook 2011 would absolutely win. I feel sometimes that it's got so many beach ball running so many times, I have to take an air pump and pump in the side to keep it.
Yeah, I think we'd be pissed in no time.
Oh, I know. Speaking of a photography show, that's one of the interesting things for me, and it's always kind of an education for me every year, is because all my best friends are photographers. I've got friends who are designers, but what I mean is all my best friends, all like really good friends of mine who are photographers, I learned so much about photography from them, and yet I've never had this urge to be a photographer as like you guys are. where it would be something that would make me money. I've got a D300S I bought in 2011, purely because it did bracketing so I could do HDR.
Oh, what a fad that was.
Yeah. And I bought that over I think it was a something like a D700 or 750 or so. There was another camera that came out and it didn't do bracketing. So I bought the D300S. And I struggle with the logic of photography. Composition, I can take a great photograph on my phone, but I find the camera becomes an obstacle for me because it's a barrier between my brain getting the thing in front of me. So when I go to the photography show and I speak to photographers and I watch them, and obviously I'm managing the live stage, so I'm watching every single session, and I see the gear and the lighting and everything you need, I do get a little bit envious. And then it's always at the photography show where I'm kind of, maybe this is the year I get the camera. Maybe this is the year I go, if I did add photography to what I do, man alive, what a difference it would make to the kind of things I teach. Because at the moment I'm restricted that I could probably teach Lightroom, but I don't, because I don't take photographs. I could probably teach like retouching and more photography-based Photoshop work. But the thing is there's already 1,000 people teaching both of those for photography. There's less people teaching design. Makes it harder for me to get work. But I do think every year, I have this thing every year, and I've had it for 10 years now. Maybe this is the year I actually bother to learn photography, to learn the basics, to be comfortable with the camera. And my problem is learning to work the camera. I kind of know that what ISO does and aperture and all that. My barrier is always operating the camera. So when I get to a photography show, it's like, I don't know, I can afford it. I could probably spend around, this much money on a camera. I could do with it for this kind of thing, because I'm currently using a Logitech webcam that Glenn gave me that's probably 5 years old. So could I have better quality? In which case, do I go for like a vlogger camera that's suitable, less so for kind of the photography, but more for the video? Because the new cameras now do great video. I'm more interested in video than I am in photography. And I still don't know. Maybe this year at a photography show, if there was a good deal, I might be tempted. I've got budget. Like we said earlier, can I justify spending that much on a camera?
Yeah.
If all I'm going to do is use it for video, if I'm not going to bother with photography. But if whatever camera I buy, I'll own it for the next 5 years at least.
Yeah. But I think, that was actually exactly the reason why I eventually decided to buy a new camera, was because of the video functionality. Video is becoming more and more important in what I do.
Yeah.
And so, I needed a tool that actually allows me to do both. Yeah. And so I'm literally a hybrid shooter. I do a lot of photography work. I do a little bit of video, and it seems like that bit of it, is becoming more and more important. And, these are not necessarily big jobs, because really for bigger jobs, you need to work with a team anyway. You need to have a, dedicated cinematographer or, videographer and whatever. But there are lots of like little things where all of a sudden there's a requirement for just a little bit of video or something like that, where previously these would have been like complete like still shoots, And so it just gives you that flexibility. So I needed a tool that allowed me to do both, to a degree.
Yeah.
And so that's really what swung my my sort of decision-making process.
And behind the scenes as well, because you guys do behind the scenes, which is great. I love all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's another thing. To have a camera that allows you to do both. To a reasonable degree, basically. Is really invaluable, because you don't have to carry around 3 different bodies and 6 different lenses and all the rest of it. It just really just all fits into one bag. In fact, the photography, you'll see, I'll just carry around one bag, and it'll allow me to do everything I need to do, there, to create all the stuff I want to create. And that's the thing. I need to fit everything into one bag. I sling it over my shoulder. I'm off, and I can do all the things that I need to do at, within that little package.
Yeah.
And that's, so it's like, it's getting to the point where Yeah, you can have tons and tons of gear, but now the issue is that I need to minimize all that gear and actually bring it down so I can really just have potentially just one lens and one body, and that'll do most of it, But the thing about photography, it's an interesting thing, I've just experienced exactly what you described with just very recently, because I learned how to ride a motorbike.
Okay.
Actually, no, I haven't learned. Well, I've done what's called the CBT, the compulsory basic training, because I recently got myself a Vespa, like a scooter, which is a 125cc scooter, and so you need the CBT thing, course that you have to do. And so it's the first time really I've learned how to ride a bike, and I've been out practicing over the last few weeks and everything else, and I'm starting to feel more confident on it.
Yeah.
But it's a million miles from driving a car. Like, I've been driving a car since I was 18.
Yeah.
I get in the car, don't even think about it. You know where everything is.
You're like, how did I get here? I don't remember this journey.
Exactly. But, you know how to use the tool because you're so used to it. You've done it for so many times, so many years. It's totally second nature. Riding the Vespa is not second nature for me at all. It's a completely new experience. It's in a sense, it's like me against the machine.
Yeah.
And whenever, it's like at first, when we passed the CBT, and then I made it, I was allowed to take the thing out on the public road. Whoa. People watch out if you live in the area. You see a mint green Vespa zooming past. So it might be me. Get out of the way. But so you go around like the local streets at first, and then once you get confident with that, you then go onto like the main road, and then you deal with all the traffic and everything else, all the obstructions, and then you get comfortable with that. Then you go onto the road where you can do 50, because this thing does like 60 miles an hour. And it feels like you feel like you're doing 600 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Right? And so you get more and more confident, of course, the more you ride it and the more you practice with it. But I mean, I've only had it for a few months, for maybe 2 months or something, but I still feel there is this machine between me and the driving experience.
Yeah.
And I'm still kind of grappling with and fighting this machine, trying to control this machine. And that's exactly the same thing when you first get into photography. It's the camera at first. And of course, most people learn to shoot with natural light, so they learn how to use the camera, just using natural light. And once they've done that, they might then move into like using speed lights.
Yeah.
And then eventually they might move into using, studio strobes. And of course, the minute you use studio strobes, it's all about like not only the light itself, but it's about modifiers and, lighting ratios, and it gets a lot more complicated very quickly. And that's the obstacle. That's where people think like, oh my God, there's like so much to learn, and I have to control all these different things. And it's like I have to split my brain into many pieces, because one part is to think about the lighting, the other thing is to think about a camera, then you have to pose the subject, you got to give instructions, you got to think about,
quick spin more plates.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. You've got to do the creative as well. You got to think of the shoot, you got to come up with stuff, on the hoof, because, depending on the shoot that you're doing. So you really have to like balance a lot of plates, all at the same time. And that's really overwhelming, in the beginning. But the more you get used to it, the more the technical part of it becomes secondary. Like when I do headshots now, or when I do a location shoot or something, I really don't think, no, I mean, I consider the lighting at the beginning. I think, how am I going to light this, But once that is done, I'm so familiar with my gear, the camera, although the new camera, But with the D750, I've done it for so many years. It's like driving a car blind.
Yeah.
And it's like, it gives you then the freedom to really focus on what it is that you're shooting.
Yeah.
The subject that you're shooting, the posing, all of that, the creative part in it. And that's the point where you want to get to. But of course, just like anything, just like riding a bike, just like learning how to ride a Vespa, this takes time. It's not something that happens
absolutely
next week. This is why, of course, it takes years and years and years and years of practice for a lot of professionals. When you see somebody like Scott Kelby, for example, or you see professionals do what they do best,
Yeah.
It's like, that there are years and years of work that's gone into it. Like Glenn is a really good example. You look at his videos, now, I mean, how good do they look now compared to,
Exactly. Clayton, we're going to have Glenn on his Shootsy Jaws, so don't nick my guest.
Right.
But we're having Glenn on the show to talk about his evolution of how the video has become an important part of his business now. Possibly more so than the photography, because whilst he's making content about photography, and it's the same with a guy that we had on a couple of episodes ago on He Shoots He Draws, that I mentioned earlier, James Barnard. The reason I knew James was because he was on TikTok and he came up on my For You page because I followed designers. James came up, he's English, he lives in Australia, his content was good, his delivery was good, and I started to follow him and I realised, wow, this guy's a graphic designer, but I can tell he's having to invest in a lot of time in video to get this content out, to bring in work for graphic design. So I had him on and we talked about it, and he subsequently released a video course now. It's only like $20, but it's brilliant. And it breaks down how to plan for video. It doesn't have to be for TikTok. He just did it for TikTok because that's where he's had the most success, but it works for Reels and YouTube. And he breaks it down, like how much time he has to take out of his day as a designer to film, like to plan, script, film, edit, upload, go through the process of what TikTok wants or what Instagram needs, to put all the captions and everything. And he said, like, he has to take, if he does 5 days of work now, he has to not only take 2 days out to create video content, but he also has to outsource his admin work, because he can't also do his invoicing and his admin stuff, because he said, I now can't afford to not do video. But he only uses his iPhone and Premiere Pro. He can use a bit of After Effects, but he says, I've my iPhone up here, I plan my content, record it, and I work out how much content I get out. But if it's an experiment I posted the other day on Instagram, and anyone who's watching or listening, try this out for me. This is to show the importance of how video is becoming kind of the prominent thing. So go on Instagram, like if you've got Instagram open, swipe it and close it. Now open Instagram. Now I follow, I don't know, maybe a couple of thousand people. So I get quite a varied range of content. So starting from the first thing you see, count how many posts before you see a photograph. Okay. My experience at the moment on Instagram is, it's like I'm on TikTok. It's like video, video, video advert, video, video, video advert, video, video, video advert, video. I think it was 19 or 20 posts before I saw an actual photograph from somebody that I follow, because video's taking over the content. Now, I think there could become a saturation point, or everyone will become so good, it'll be hard to know who to watch or what to follow. So it's something to include and is important. And more photographers are having to learn video now because of, like, Glenn with behind the scenes, is his video content is great. His editing is amazing, and he's improving all the time. I used to watch, excuse me, I used to watch Casey Neistat on YouTube, not because particularly of his content, which is very good anyway. I enjoy watching him, but I used to like deconstructing his editing and his shooting process. Like when you see him on his skateboard going through New York down the street, you're kind of realizing, okay, he's planned where he's going to ride. He's had to go to the bottom of the road, set up his camera, go back to the top of the road, ride back down the road to be filmed, to go past it, then go back and get the camera. And it's like, he's never just going from A to B. I like the breaking down the creative process of that, in the same way you set up a shot, you set up a photo shoot. And it's all educational. I think we should all learn these things. I don't like being on camera. I'm doing it more now, and I'm going to have to do it more in the future, because I've said before, I don't do Instagram live. I don't do a sudden, I'm just going to go live when I'm walking along and I've got a thought in my head. It's not what I do. But while you were just talking then, you made me think of something where I said about buying a camera at the photography show. And I was thinking, kind of in my budget, I'm thinking around £600 to £800 for a half decent mirrorless, probably, because that seems to be the ones that are going. I know there's like Fuji, Sony, Canon, Nikon, probably all do them now. And I know I can go well over 1,000, but I was thinking, I know I can get something good for what I need that would be good for this video stuff, around £600 to £800. But my brain is kind of going, £600 to £800. And I realised only this morning I was on the Apple website looking at the iPhone 14 Pro Max, 256, but in the colour that I wanted, not even the top storage, 256 with Apple Care. And I had 1,500 quid in my basket for a phone, for a camera phone, which I justify because it's a mobile computer for me. I can do so much on it. Like, it's just incredible what I can do on my phone. And the fact that you've now got this awesome video capability, you've got this awesome camera, but it's like, I think nothing of admittedly paying it monthly over 2 years interest free, because I prefer to do it that way. But it's still, I'm spending £1,500 on a phone, but I'm kind of bulking at £600 on a really good camera for what I need. Why? And that,
exactly.
I know my phone can do it. I don't want to use my phone for that. But it's like, where we put the value on things is, we won't spend on this, but we'll happily spend on that. And yet it's, a phone sucks time away from you. Because how long do we do the doom scrolling? Oh, I just quickly go on Instagram. I just quickly go on TikTok, and an hour later, you're just like, your thumb's just like you're hitchhiking.
Well, that's what I find with TikTok. Exactly. It's like, well, an hour. What? It's like I've time traveled 2 hours into the future per second.
So I love that whole conversation with photographers and designers about gear, in the way they justify gear in their process they do, and how they budget for it, how they earn from it. I think it's a really important thing to not just think about buying stuff. It's to think about, like we said, how does it make your life better? I mean, you were saying about using the camera. I was fortunate enough to be with Alan Hess in San Diego, and he was doing a shoot at a gig, and he was sort of talking to me about, he takes 2 cameras, he's got 3 songs, he's at the front. I think you've done music photography as well.
Yeah.
Alan says, like, my camera's in my hand, and I know what my camera is set at for what I just did. So he just starts adjusting his camera in his hand without looking at it, ready for the next shot. And he knows that when he pulls that camera up, all the settings he knows he needs for that shot, he did blind. Mm-hmm. In the same way, I used to be able to text on an old Nokia with a phone under the table, and I could text out a whole message without looking at the keyboard, because I knew where the keys were, and yet it was tactile. You can't on an iPhone, but
of course not.
It was like, when you can start using gear like that, like you said, before long, you don't have to learn to balance in a car. You have to learn to balance on a Vespa. Before long, you won't be thinking about how fast you're going, the motorbike itself. You'll be looking at Tower Bridge as it starts to raise, thinking, I could do this.
Yeah.
So you're now looking at the experience you can receive from the tool that you've learned to use.
Yeah.
And that's where we should be with gear, is enjoying what we've invested in and getting the maximum from it as well. And so
that's it. Yeah, and of course, the only way we get there is by actually doing it. I mean, this is the thing. No matter how many YouTube videos we watch, about how to use this function on your camera, or how to do this in Photoshop. I mean, Photoshop is a really great example. I mean, you can watch X amount of different videos about how to do this on Photoshop and how to do that on Photoshop and stuff. But unless you actually sit down and do it and then use it time and again, it just won't become second nature.
Yeah. I had to YouTube something today for Illustrator. Completely forgot how to do it. And I watched I typed, how do I do this? saw it and I was just like,
Yeah, and sometimes, it's like, I did this thing the other day. It's like something super simple. I did a flyer or something like that, and I wanted to create a box with a gradient in it. I mean, super simple, right? I mean, and my brain just went, I've forgotten how to do it. What?
yeah.
And then I had to look out, but I'm like, okay. And of course there's always 5 million different ways that you can do something. But
Yeah.
But it was just like, yeah, I mean, I'm the same. I look stuff up all the bloody time,
Yeah.
whether it's like Photoshop or, and of course there's, there are always new things that come out, with respective upgrades of a particular software, whether it's Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever. And it's been, like I said earlier, especially over the last year or year and a half or something, there've been so many developments, I think really drastic developments, both in Lightroom with the, with masking, for example, that's huge.
Yeah.
It's a huge thing. In Photoshop with the neural filter sets, they're really improving. I remember when I first introduced them, I kind of,
gimmick.
Yeah, it's not really happening. But you can see over the last year how much they've improved.
Look at the colorization of a black and white photograph.
Yeah.
I know people that this has been their job for years.
Yeah.
This is their speciality. And again, like anything, you can dumb down stuff and make it quick for the masses. And then you have the experts, Annie Leibovitz is going to spend a lot more time taking a photograph than I ever would. So I picked up the point and shoot on auto, and I'll get a great photo, but she'll put the effort into it. So I still think there's a level of, you kind of still have to have that, you either go this end or this end. But with dumbing it down, not dumbing it down, but yeah, simplifying.
For me, the thing is, I always explain this, like when I do talks, for example, I always explain this, the marriage between the camera and the post-production, i.e. Photoshop, for example. I sort of explain it, it's like an electric guitar and an amp.
Yeah.
For all of y'all who play the electric guitar there, you may know that maybe if you don't, I explain it. Basically, if you play an electric guitar, you can strum it, and it's really super quiet. It makes hardly any sound. It doesn't sound like you would imagine an electric guitar to sound at all. It just sounds like a plingy little thing.
Yeah.
It's very super quiet. In order to make it sound like the way we love hearing electric guitars, you have to plug it into an amplifier. And, the amplifier on its own is just a box. It doesn't make a sound. If you just take the amplifier on its own, it's a box with a speaker in it. It does nothing.
Yeah.
But when you plug the guitar into the amp and you marry those two things up, that's when you get really beautiful music. And, photography is, especially digital photography, it's a little bit like that. On one hand, you've got the camera and you take the photo. And on the other hand, you've got the computer and Photoshop and all of the power and capabilities that lie within that.
Yeah.
And when you marry the two up, that's when, the boundaries of your creativity are limitless, literally. And that's, that's the beauty of it. It basically just gives you that positronic mega brain that now allows you to realize all the things that previously just happened in your brain.
Yeah.
And once you start doing that, and this is like, something I think is always try and drive that point home, is when you start working like that. And I know there are many people out there who basically say, oh, I'm like, I'm a traditional photographer. I want to get it right in camera, fine. And to those people, I say, I also want to get it right in camera. What I do, though, is I consider the whole process. I think of it as, taking the photo is the starting point and completing the edit is the finish point. And so I shoot with the edit in mind, with the post-production in mind.
Yeah.
So I also need to get it right in camera, but I have to get it right for the edit, which is intrinsically different from getting it right in the sense that by the time I press the shutter button, that's the finished product.
Yeah.
So when I shoot something, whether that's, when that's, for instance, the photo project that I've been doing for a few years, 3 hits in a row, when I shoot that, I have the edit in mind. So when you see the raw image as it comes out of the camera, it doesn't look anything like the final.
Yeah.
but I shoot for the edit because I know exactly what I'm going to do in the edit to give it the look that I want to achieve. And if the lighting isn't right, it won't work in the edit, and if the aperture isn't right, or the background light isn't right, or whatever, if these things aren't positioned correctly, then I'm going to have a problem in post-production. And so, getting it right in camera, I think nowadays means a slightly different thing from what it used to mean back in the day.
Yeah. Before, it used to be really pretentious. Like, it used to drive me mad. Even though I'm not a photographer, it was like, really? Like, is that what you're going to hang your hat on? Is you going to stroke your chin and go, well, I like to get the riding camera?
Exactly.
And I used to say, I know it's not the same industry, but Jimi Hendrix would not be Jimi Hendrix with an acoustic guitar. Just like acoustic. When you go on stage and you've got no amps, no mics, you do an acoustic set. Now, Jimi Hendrix could probably play an acoustic guitar really well, but when you throw the amp in and he becomes like, or any great guitarist, every great album, every photographer that does it in camera loves music. Every album they own was produced in a studio. It was never the raw, the Beatles in a room, or the Bon Jovi or whoever in a room. But it was they knew what they wanted the song to sound like. Nobody cares it's been produced. Nobody cares it's been in a studio with knobs and dashes, because what I care about is what I see.
Yeah.
Is it a great image? Is it telling me a great story or conveying a moment? In the same way, does the music evoke an emotion in me? I don't care. It's like me being a graphic designer and going, oh no, I actually just only work for my sketches. I don't like to use Photoshop. I just like to sketch everything out, and I just use the raw sketches. You're great, brilliant, but nobody cares apart from
no, it wasn't. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly.
But now it's like you said, it's getting it right in camera. Like we said at the top of the show, was the reason why your retouches are so quick is because you did all the hard work in camera. You got your lighting and you got all of that done, so that the retouching is a small part of the process. It's like a finishing off. It's just the icing, tidying the icing up on the cake.
Yeah, and of course, all of that really comes with experience as well, because, there've been, of course, in the past, there've been numerous times where I've been, editing something, or I've been retouching something, and you get to the point and you go, oh, God, what a pain in the backside. Had I just done this originally, then it would have saved me so much time. And of course, over time, you accumulate all these experiences, and then the next time you actually, you're setting up for a shoot, you kind of go, right, if I do this, then that's going to save me X amount of time. I mean, it's a great thing. And I know one of our previous guests, Gary, tells the story, but actually, I mean, I have a very, very similar story, which is, you have this thing, especially when you're doing like volume headshots, at a corporate event or something. There's always somebody who basically has some kind of, I don't know, mustard stain on their lapel or something, right? And they're gonna go, you could just take that out in Photoshop, right? Then you go to, right, if you just turn this way, click, you move them out of, you post them in a slightly different way so that you can't see the mustard stain. Bang, that's it. So now I don't have to spend even 20 seconds in Photoshop to get rid of that. It's just, you just post them in a slightly different way. So now we can't see the mustard stain. See you later. You know what I mean? It's like, there's a lot of that kind of stuff that makes, that really makes a massive difference. And it's never so much of a problem when you're retouching one image. But when you're doing a job where all of a sudden you're looking at hundreds of images, then, let's say you've got 400 images to post-process, 10 seconds spent extra per image times 400.
Absolutely.
It's
1,000
seconds, however many minutes it is. Quite a lot.
Hey, Siri.
Quite a lot of seconds. Anyway, but it very quickly turns into, only a few seconds per image, but before you know it, you're spending hours extra on the editing, and so it's always, my part of the fun in the whole game for me is always just to see where I can shave off a little bit of time, so that, and even if it just means I can I don't know, watch an extra episode of Sandman or something, whatever.
So
whatever.
I've fallen into. We'll come back to photography, but you say now I've tried to break up the time I spend on what I do so that I'm not in here all the time. And so I've been kind of treating myself and thinking, okay, I'm gonna watch a series all the way through. I'm gonna educate myself, because one of the things I love doing is networking and talking to people and going out. And today was a perfect example about pop culture in conversation. Is somebody posted something in our Teams chat, and this is specifically for British people over a certain age, and I don't know what the threshold is in age,
right?
But somebody posted something claiming something had happened, and I posted a photograph of this celebrity to convey what I felt about what they just said. And the photograph I posted, because I didn't believe what they said, was a photograph of Jimmy Hill. Now, okay, back when I was a kid, I don't know where this came from without the internet, but every child on the playground knew to do this. But if somebody told you something that was, you felt they were lying or wasn't true, your response would be, yeah, Jimmy Hill. You'd stroke your chin and be like, oh yeah, Jimmy Hill. It turned into, I think, like Chinny Recon or something. But it was so now if anyone says anything, my friends are like my age, they get it. We always post a picture of Jimmy Hill, but it's like pop culture. So I decided I'm going to educate myself, not just in my realm of expertise. I'd never watched Breaking Bad, so I binged the whole of Breaking Bad. It was all right. Maybe the problem is binge watching it and not having the thrill of what's coming next week. But I wouldn't put it in my top 10 of shows I've ever watched.
Right.
But I can now have a conversation about Breaking Bad with someone if I'm talking about anything at a show. And I've now gone into a show that I vowed not to bother watching because it was like, oh, everyone's going on about it. Oh, I'm not going to bother. Game of Thrones.
Right.
So I've decided I'm going to watch an episode of Game of Thrones every night to work through. So when I'm in conversation, I'm going to Adobe Max in October. One of the key things of networking and talking is pop culture, like what's going on, and even just chatting about a TV show. And as silly as this sounds, it's a really good skill when we talk about reading a book or watching a show or catching a film. Even if you've got no interest in it, do it anyway, because it's a great conversation when you can be part of a conversation. Because like I said about getting it right in camera and how pretentious and poncy it is, I felt the same going, oh no, I don't watch Game of Thrones.
Yeah, exactly.
Then suddenly I'm not part of the conversation. Or, oh no, Breaking Bad, I'm one of the few people who hasn't watched Breaking Bad. I thought, what a knob. So I watched both, and then I try to watch shows on things that maybe I hear, I know people are talking about, just to be educated. And it's a really good conversation starter. That's a little, just a tip thing there, is part of being part of a conversation anywhere is, so I'm breaking my time up now and doing that.
That's a generally great tip when it comes to networking in general, because the thing I think what people tend to forget sometimes is, unless you actually really get into networking, is the fact that they're always human beings at the end of everything. And humans connect through human interaction.
Absolutely.
And of course we converse in conversation. That's how we communicate. So it's really that's part of the whole thing. And I mean, this is a great segue into talking about a photography show, actually.
Yeah.
Because the thing I look forward to the most, I have to say, and I've been looking forward to it all year since last year. We had a great experience at the photography show last year. That's of course, because we
post COVID photography show, so it was a lot quieter. It's going to be a lot bigger this year, a lot busier.
Yeah, I mean post COVID, of course, but it was also this thing where for Nick and myself, we've been doing the Camera Shake podcast,
yeah,
and we had guests on the show like yourself, and then and then being able to meet people in the flesh for the first time was just an amazing experience. We had a really an awesome time, and not only, I mean, of course, the show is great and there's lots of tech there and lots of stuff and blah, blah, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But, for me, the enjoyable part was really, what happened around the show.
Exactly.
Going out for a drink, meeting up with people, just chatting, getting to know other people, being introduced to, other people, and just kind of creating this, this sort of network of people. And the one thing that I'm looking forward to this year is really just to reconnect with people. That's my main goal, this show, this year. So if you are watching this video, today should be Thursday. The show actually starts tomorrow on Friday, and it lasts until Tuesday. But bear in mind that on Monday, the show will be closed.
Yes, for the Queen. God bless her.
Yeah. So now I'm left in this situation where I think, what am I going to do on Monday? Because I actually, I've got a hotel booked until Monday, so I'm going to be there on Monday.
Are you there for all 4 days?
I'm there until Monday evening, basically.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I'm basically now I'm thinking, right, I've got to find something to do on Monday.
But again, that's a really important point, is going back to when we were talking about investing in photography, investing in graphic design and gear and stuff. This is another thing that I'm lucky I get to talk about. I don't know whether sometimes I just sound like an old man with a lot of opinions, but trying to pass off advice. And it is different. Not that I've got disposable income, but I think it all depends on what's important right now, and money's tight, and I appreciate it's not easy to throw money around. But events like the photography show are an investment in you. So,
of course.
All right, if you've got to pay a car park and a train fare and £10 entry and a little bit of food, let's say going to the photography show for the day is going to cost you £100. Think of that £100 as the photography show is going to be a place where you're going to network, communicate, you're going to build the start of some good relationships, you're going to learn, you're going to share information, so people are going to go ask about you. That's a really good investment in yourself. So, appreciate, I never like the thing that's too expensive. I think what people are saying is, I can't afford that, because everything has a price for a reason. Everything has a price behind it for a reason. And we know that because as professionals, we charge what we charge because we know what's all behind us to make it that. So when you get an opportunity to go to an event, like, I don't work the photography show because I can't wait to look at all the cameras. I work the photography show because I get to meet my photography friends. It's every year I meet new people. Like last year, highlight of the show, apart from meeting you guys, Tommy Reynolds. What an legend. Love him. Love Tommy Reynolds. I'm going to get him on the show. I haven't had him yet. He's just, him and his partner, his wife, just had a baby. So, but I met Tommy Reynolds for the first time, and I get to meet really lovely people, and you will connect with some and others you won't connect with. It is very much not everyone's going to be your friend. But I'm going to go to Adobe Max in October, which is LA. So I've got a 13-hour flight. I'm not going because I want to sit in all the classes and learn how to use InDesign and Illustrator and Photoshop, because I teach that stuff. I'm going to that show because I want to see the people. I want to see the guys at Adobe again. I want to see my designer colleagues, people I only get to see at those events. So it's a little bit costly. So luckily, because of what I do now, some of that cost is covered by things that I do. But previously to that, I was paying for myself to go. But now I just had to write my bio for somebody last night, and I had to list all the things I've done. And these are things I've only done since 2010. I couldn't believe what I've achieved in 12 years. The list of stuff I was putting that I'd done. And then I was going, oh God, I've done that as well. Writing it down. Oh crikey, I've missed that out. And it was because I put my backside in a plane and went to places and talked to people and could communicate about photography and design and the world and life and travel and all sorts. Yeah. And now when I look back at, the relationships I've built and the friends that I've got, and like you guys, I said to you at the photography show, it was like we'd known each other for 10 years already.
I know.
Like,
Amazing.
how was it? It was ridiculous. That was the first time we were meeting, because it felt like we met 100 times before. And that's what I love about something like the photography show is everyone's there for this with the same interest.
Yeah.
And you need to go up and talk to people. You need to stop, and if you watch someone, if you sit in the editing suite or behind the lens or wherever, and you've just watched someone, and you've learned something, because there was one, I went and sat at the editing suite, I think it was last year, and this guy was doing a thing about 360, and I think there were 6 people sat down to watch him. He was late on it in the day. I wish I could remember the company he was with. I think it was something 360, but he'd actually prepared footage at the show to use in teaching. And I sat watching it, and I learned so much about 360 videography and photography that at the end I waited and I went up to him and I said, "Hey, just wanted to say thank you. That was really interesting. I learned this and this. I hadn't even thought of it like that before. That was really good content. I hope to see you back here again. I'm going to go and follow you on social media and check out your website."
Yeah.
Costs you nothing to do that, but it means the world to the person
Of course.
teaching stuff. So I advise, if you're at the photography show, go and talk to people, because that person you go up and chat to, you just might have something really weird in common, like you lived 2 streets apart.
Exactly. How crazy.
Or you've got a mutual friend, or you were both in the same place once. And I can't put enough emphasis on personal relationships and events.
Yeah, I mean, the chances that, because this is such a small industry in a way.
Yeah.
The chances that you have something in common or some kind of mutual relationship with somebody are so high, actually.
Yeah.
That it's incredible, really. It's or even if it's not necessarily shared people, but like shared experiences, for example. That's the other thing. And I found again, this is what I found personally. It's been the most rewarding thing about going to the photography show last year. And although I'll be there creating a Camera Shake podcast episode, of course. I mean, that's but that's almost secondary. That's not really why I'm going. I'm really going to see you and and all the people, Dave and lots of people that I've met last year. Some people I knew beforehand, some people I've met for the first time last year. But I'm really looking forward to meeting people again, because actually, over the past year, I found that a lot of people that I've met, I've sort of stayed in touch with on via social media, actually. Whether that was like an occasional like on an image or a comment, or it's just with some people, I've spoken more. But it's it's a really great opportunity to come back together. And I think, this year is going to be really a pivotal year as well, because last year was the first time in 2 years, after the pandemic, and it was the first time back, and it was really a huge thing, I think, for most people to actually be back in person. And of course, it was smaller, and the aisles were wider, and it was, some people were maybe a little careful, and and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And of course, it's going to be bigger this year. I've checked out the list of of exhibitors, and I've really noticed, some of the big names have come back, like Manhattan, for instance, back, Aperture back. It's, some of the big names were missing last year, and they're back. And that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
But it's, I'm really looking forward to actually touching base, with humans and just saying like, hey, man, how's it been going? Because I think we've all been thrown into a situation over the last year where reality has kind of hit home again, where all of us have gotten busier. And I know, the reason why Nick is, hasn't been as present on the podcast, recently, is because he's just working really hard. He's spending a lot of time working. And that's very different. When we started the podcast, it was, in a sense, out of necessity. It was the pandemic, and, we had a lot of time on our hands and all the rest of it. And of course, things have gone back to normal and reality has hit home.
Same for me and Alan.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're not getting episodes out as quick as often as we had. And after a while, you feel guilty because, people are listening to the podcast. Admittedly, no one has ever messaged me and said, hey, you didn't put an episode out this week.
Oh, I had that. I actually...
Oh, have you?
Yeah, I had that a few weeks ago, like maybe a month ago, whenever it was. And, I kind of thought, okay, look, what needs to be, I just need to, I put out an episode every week. And ultimately, whether that's just me talking about some subject for 20 minutes, or half an hour or whatever, whether we have a guest on the show and the whole episode is 2 hours long, doesn't matter. Whether it's, Nick and me together when he's got time, brilliant, but there are obviously people out there who are looking forward to an episode every week, and I feel guilty.
I do feel guilty, but like you said, Nick's working. Alan, when he joined the podcast, all the timing of everything, of Glyn moving house and having stuff going on in his business, was that the timing of him leaving and Alan joining suited Alan down to the ground, because he'd lost photography. He'd lost concert photography, event photography. Now, Alan's working nearly like every day. And if you follow him on social media, you'll see all his today. He always puts today's office or tonight's office. And it means we're not recording as often. So, but the good thing I've done, particularly over this last 2 weeks, is I go back and find old interviews that we've done. So I've got 3, which, speaking of photography show, we've got Kaylee Greer, who's a really good friend, who have been somewhat instrumental in helping that happen.
I tell you what, this actually, just let's just stick on subject for a second. So this is one of the things I'm really looking forward to, is Kaylee Greer, or potentially, meeting Kaylee at the photography show, because my 11-year-old daughter is a massive fan. And, I've been talking to Kaylee a little while ago about coming on the podcast and stuff, and it hasn't yet materialized, right?
Yeah.
But the one thing that my 11-year-old daughter says to me, and she's, she loves animals, she loves dogs.
Yeah.
Big dog fanatic. And she also likes photography, and she likes to take pictures of dogs. She's 11, so she calls herself a photographer.
Yeah.
Apparently. But the one thing I say to Cara is, whenever I say to her, like, oh, have you actually listened to a full episode of the Camera Shake podcast? She goes like, no, why would I do that? It's boring. That's right. Okay. And she goes, then she says, like, the only time I would listen to a whole episode is if you had Kaylee on the show. And I'm like, look, it's going to happen at some point.
If you need an introduction to Kaylee, I'll be more than happy to do it. She's going to be our guest for the live episode of He Shoots, He Draws on the live stage. We've only got half an hour, but we got a couple of things happening with Kaylee. Is that we're going to interview her. We're going to open it up to a couple of questions from the crowd as well, and we've also able to give a copy of her book away. So we're going to set the rules as to who gets a copy of that book, and we've got something fun. See if anyone does it. If they do it, they deserve it. But
right.
Yeah, with the guests, you've got Kaylee Greer, Chase Jarvis, people that I know, Roberto. So we were lucky enough that we'd interviewed Kaylee, we'd interviewed Chase Jarvis, we'd interviewed Tony Harmer. I did also put out an episode with Elise Swopes, who is amazing. If you don't know Elise Swopes, just go and at Swopes. She's a great videographer, photographer, creative. So where we've not been able to put episodes out, we do replay episodes. So we put out older episodes, because we know that we do get new listeners, and we've got a very loyal bunch of listeners, and I want to at least put an episode out to stay relevant. And we don't get sponsorship. We have a partnership with the photography show every year, because it looks good for us to be on their website and say we're sponsored. But I miss this. It's like I've been lucky enough the last 2 weeks I've had 2 people interview me, which is great, because I love chatting to people about what we love. But I'm taking my gear with me to the show, but because I'm working it and teaching a session on the editing suite and doing the podcast, and we've lost a day, I always take the gear. I never get around to doing an interview, because I just spend all the time like hanging out with you guys, or just go and chat with someone, go to dinner, go and have a coffee with someone. I don't want to waste time being too technical on something. But I say we'll take the gear. But I think for you, it's a great way to get introduced to people who you want on the show that you haven't had. So definitely a good source of inspiration. But I know when I get back from the show, I'll be on to Alan going, mate, we got to get back into this. We've got to get some episodes out. So I've got a couple of people lined up and planned. But I mean, this is one of the tools that we said on the last episode. The podcast opens up a door to speak to people who wouldn't normally make time for you.
100%. I mean, it's exactly right. For us, it's been amazing, especially I'd say the first year and a half, we interviewed a lot of people. That was really basically what we mainly did. Virtually almost every week, we had a guest on. And then we changed the format a little bit because things were getting busy, especially, Nick was getting really busy.
Yeah.
And so it became very difficult to schedule things in that way. But, the incredible thing for us was that we quite organically went from interviewing people that we knew, friends.
Yeah.
Fellow photographers, to then all of a sudden being able to interview people who had a name in the industry, to then all of a sudden being in a position where we had people come on the show who were at the top of the game in their niche of photography.
Yeah.
Like people who are like world class.
Well, you got Joe McNally on. I was so shocked when you got Joe on, because it's like, who doesn't want to talk to Joe?
See, and the thing with Joe, I mean, this is the thing that really floored me completely, was so when we had Joe on, we'd been planning it for quite some time. It was in the pipeline for a good few months. But then I believe his mother-in-law passed.
Yeah.
And of course, that's a traumatic event for anyone. And of course, we didn't expect him to come on the show. Of course not. And he called me up and he said, like, look, I get up at 4:00 in the morning if you want to do it at that time. And we're like, you really? I mean, do you really want to? I mean, we're not asking that of you.
Yeah.
You cannot ask that. I mean, like, you don't have to get up at 4:00 in the morning for us. And he goes, no, I really want to do it. And it was amazing. It was just amazing to have him on the show and actually make that, go through that effort at such a difficult time and still, keep that commitment. It was just, it was mind-blowing to us. This, one of my favorite episodes, of course, because as anybody who speaks to Joe McNally will just, your head will just explode with all this, how could you just learn? But it was just, and of course you kind of, you think about it for a minute and you kind of go like, wow, he really wanted to be on our show. I mean, we're so like humbled.
Yeah.
And whether that's, we've had a whole lot of people on the show. I think, and I've said this many times on this podcast. In the very, very beginning, what I actually did was I put a list together of just dream team names, right? Like wouldn't it be cool if we get these people on the show? And this, because you gotta reach high. Do you know what I mean? I mean, you gotta try. And so, month after month, as we managed to get more and more names to come on the show, all of a sudden it became easier to access, other people. And
absolutely, yeah.
And I guess, I mean, for us, it was just like, it was this thing where we thought like, oh, well, we started this whole thing, just us, the two of us, and they could be talking about geeky stuff that nobody else would be interested in, And then the only reason why we started inviting guests on the show was because we thought, well, it might be interesting to talk to somebody else, actually.
Yeah.
And maybe we can learn a thing or two. And
we gone the opposite, because we started off predominantly having guests and talking about, okay, who are you? Where did you start? How did you get to where you are today? Which is an interesting story, but an often told story, just it's being told differently to two different people. So as time went on, because what I loved about your show was you guys would talk about a topic, like two guys, you're in the pub two guys are talking about something and you want to join in the conversation. So you would talk about things. And I kind of envied that a little bit. And now, like, you've inspired us to flip what we do. So I want less guests, unless it's somebody who I think can bring value to me and has an interesting story to tell for the listeners, because there's so many more podcasts now that if you capture anyone's time, thank you for listening to ours and not all the celebrities interviewing all the other celebrities.
Yeah.
But now I want more shows about topics. So, I want to talk to Glyn about the transition of going from photography to video and what he's learned, and talking about his drone photography. And Alan, with Alan, we've got a friend who's going to be talking about the legal side of photography. We want to talk more about topics that are of interest, which you guys do perfectly.
Yeah. Do you know, the thing about that is that's sort of an interview technique I've learned through a channel called Hot Ones. I don't know if you've ever seen this. Have you seen Hot Ones?
Oh, the hot sauce.
Yeah.
Sean.
Yes, Sean. So
he's a brilliant interviewer.
Yes, his interview technique is really interesting because if you think about it from a pretty rational point of view, when you interview somebody, the most intuitive thing is to start at the beginning. And you go like, how did you get started in photography?
Yeah.
And then to take somebody through chronologically through their life, until you get to the point where they are today. That's an interesting story. That's like a biography. It's like that. Any biography or autobiography structure today, start at the beginning and to end up at the now.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of what we expect. But it's done and done and done and done time and again. And you can find these sort of interviews absolutely everywhere. But the really interesting thing, I think, for me, has always been to do it a little bit differently and to basically start at the now. And through conversation, you eventually get to the beginning, but you don't start the conversation there. You basically start with, what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And through talking about this and that and the other, we'll eventually get to the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, we eventually ended up...
How did that come about? Oh, because 5 years ago, when I was working here,
yes,
I met this guy.
Yeah, do you remember when in the beginning of this episode, at some point, you start talking about your first Mac and your first Photoshop like retouching project. Those are your beginnings. I mean, we could have started the whole conversation there, but actually, it was much more interesting to really start with something that was actually currently happening right now. And so it's more interesting to discover these things as you go along, I think. And what actually happens is it sort of feels like more of a natural conversation, because there's a difference between an interview and a conversation.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
The question is, do I want to listen to an interview or do I want to listen to a conversation between two humans? The thing is, in a conversation, you discover things that you have in common and you build on those, and you discover everything around that. In an interview, it's me asking the questions and the interviewee, answering them. And so it's just a slightly different approach, which I enjoy. And that's basically why we've always done it like that.
And it's lovely because you do sometimes, these people who are more popular, like Joe, have told their stories over and over. And another one is a little bit of research. So I quite often, if I'm going to get a guest on, I will go looking for other podcasts they've been on, listen to them and see where they got excited and where they felt they were going through and then I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this. So finding their hobby or an experience they had once, or, a memory or a mutual friend. Again, if you can get the guest animated, it's a much more enjoyable conversation rather than an interview. And you're not like Michael Parkinson, or David Frost and Richard Nixon. It's great because you can have I love it when, we had Austin Kleon on the show, which was a huge stroke of luck that happened, because it just so happened that his publicist was a lovely lady who lived in Norfolk. He's in America, and his publicist, his agent person who was responsible for doing all the interviews and stuff, was this lovely lady in Norfolk, and I'd holidayed there a lot. So I had messaged her and we got that going, and we got Austin, and he was laughing. He was talking about stuff that wasn't just about his books. And you kind of forget you're doing a podcast. You have to kind of reel it back in and go, oh, crap, this isn't a phone call. This is a podcast. But it's such a great moment when you break through that kind of official thing. We've had guests on who are very much straight down the line. I'm here for one thing, to talk about my book, to talk about my whatever. But some of the conversations where you just break through and you find that thing you've got in common and you have a really good chuckle about it.
Yeah, you're right. And, the thing about the last few years was, the one thing that we all had in common was the pandemic.
Yeah.
And the fears and, and our trials and tribulations to how to cope with everything that happened.
Yeah.
No matter whether you were, Joe McNally or whether you were Joe Bloggs, we all had to deal.
It was a leveler.
It was a complete leveler.
Yeah.
And it's, it was a great sort of conversation starter because here's something that we all know about and, we all have to deal with it. And the interesting thing there is that although I'm having to deal with it, you might be dealing with it in a slightly different way, and it might give me some inspiration because I'm thinking, oh, well, I hadn't thought about that. Actually, that's what you did. That's a really good idea. And and so I think from a listener's point of view, hopefully, by listening to those older episodes, that, and I know this from messages that I got, of course, is that that's really given some inspiration to a lot of the listeners at the time because everybody was out of work and everybody was sitting twiddling their thumbs, watching Netflix all day. And so hopefully that that provided some value in that respect. Hopefully,
we threw that in. We were kind of like, even now when I do the interviews for Photoshop User Magazine, we have a member every edition, and they get a couple of photos, and then I do a Q&A with them. I've started to move away from this question now because it feels like enough time's passing now that it's less in the conversation. But it would always be, how did the pandemic affect your photography, and what did you learn from that period? And we've had some really interesting answers from people because it was some people, it was, I shoot landscapes, what pandemic kind of thing. It was best for me. I could go out on my own. The nature wasn't affected, but then you had wedding photographers who that's all they did. And it was, I taught myself macro photography. I taught myself video editing. I taught my, composition and just portrait. I tried portraits. I bought the foam head and polystyrene head and tried to do portraits. So it was good that people were kind of inspiring us. Don't allow dead time to be dead time, because there's always something to learn. You don't know everything. You don't know all the things all the time. So that's kind of, I probably spent more time watching classes on things I didn't know.
I tell you what, you love this. I did in the pandemic, especially during the first few lockdowns. I did Photoshop Zoom classes.
Did you?
Yeah, free. Like basically, I just put the link out there, on social media, and whoever was interested could just, connect and join, join the classes every week. I think I can't remember, every Tuesday evening or something. 7:00 or something. I would go online on Zoom for an hour, and I would teach a particular subject of Photoshop. And do it as a free thing because, I kind of thought, well, this would be fun. People who might want to use this time and get into Photoshop a little bit more, they can join in and learn a thing or two. And it was really quite funny. We did it for maybe about 6 months or something.
Yeah. That's cool though. You made good use of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fun because actually it forced me to look into some subject areas a bit more closely.
Yeah.
Because I had to prep for it and create, sample images and, and processes and stuff.
Yeah.
But also, purely from a teaching perspective, it was an interesting thing, because it just meant I had to teach on Zoom, which I hadn't done.
Yeah.
So
I'm going through a process at the moment where I know, even though we're not in a pandemic, like I said, it's making good use of the time. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to play catch up because I love teaching in front of people, but I appreciate now video content is a lot more important, especially if I want to carry on traveling and teaching. So I'm now setting up a little project that I'm going to be speaking to like Glenn and a couple of people over the weekend. Is I'm setting up a little project for myself on YouTube that I'm not going to advertise. I'm just going to make this series of content and just put it up to make me comfortable in front of camera, for me to get that muscle memory of the way I teach. Is I'm not worrying about making mistakes. I'm kind of doing it as I go, not over editing it. It's just going to be a simple little series about one piece of software, and I'm going to learn editing. I'm going to learn After Effects. I'm going to learn more about Premiere Pro. I want to teach myself the skills to remain relevant, but also to improve myself, so that again, it goes back to having a conversation. If I then speak to someone at a show that's a master in Premiere Pro, at least I'm not going, Premiere what? I can at least talk about the software and kind of understand what they're talking about. So that the thing I took away from the pandemic is I should have done that during the pandemic more, but in a way, the timing wasn't right for me. I'm glad that now mentally I feel more comfortable on camera.
Yeah.
The kind of content I want to put out, I understand better. And I'm not going to get hung up on numbers. I'm not trying to get to 100,000 subscribers, anything of that. Maybe if the content turns out all right, I might post some of it on TikTok without being on camera, but just put the content up just purely for the feedback and for me to be more comfortable doing something I've been less comfortable about over the years. And I shouldn't be afraid of teaching on video when I can happily talk on a podcast forever. I can talk in front of people weirdly, which I never used to like doing, but because I love the teaching side of it, if nothing comes of it, nothing comes of it. But I've not wasted the time because I've learned a skill. So,
well, that's the thing. Yeah, you never waste your time learning new things.
Yeah, and I say to people, start a podcast. If you're scratching your head thinking, I don't know what to do, start a podcast. But do you know what? Don't publish it. Record about 5 episodes on your own, because you want your podcast to be about a topic you're an expert in, and just record yourself like half an hour. Set yourself a timer. Give yourself a fake name. Hi, welcome to the Dave Clayton podcast. On this week's episode, we're going to be talking about the brand new Nikon Z, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to give you my top 5 reasons why I think this is the best camera to buy, or I'm going to give you my top 5 reasons for the top 5. I've even written something down here while we were talking of something I'm going to do. People love numbers. They love lists. They love things you didn't know. So just record 5 podcast episodes for yourself. Don't publish it. Just do it to feel comfortable doing it. And if you enjoy it and you think, actually, I can bring something slightly different here, go on to, I think it's anchor.fm, and you can publish a podcast for free, and it goes to Apple, and it goes to Google, and it goes to Amazon,
Exactly.
Spotify, and then do it. But don't start a podcast with all guns blazing, because I see that often. It's like, hey, here's a new podcast. Pow, 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 pow. We're da, 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 da. And then 8 episodes later, it's gone. 12 episodes later, we're taking a break. It's because you did it for the wrong reasons, because you thought there was a result from doing it.
Exactly.
We don't do it for that. It aids what we do, but if we're expecting a gain from it too quickly, you're going to get disappointed and lose heart with it.
And also the question is always what that gain is, what the end result is. Like, I have learned that nobody in the history of podcasts has ever started a podcast to make any money with that. I mean, that's not why. I mean, there are other things more useful to do to make money. If that's what you want to do, then don't start a podcast, because, or don't start a YouTube channel to make money with it. It's not, that is not, most likely not going to happen. I think the thing with podcasting is, of course, if you have other people on the show, if you're guests on the show, and you enjoy talking to people, it's always, for me, it's always like it's the learning experience. I love chatting with people. I love catching up. I love learning, things. I always come out of a podcast episode out of an interview, a richer person than I was going in because I've learned something along the way. And that has an impact on what I do, how I do things. And certainly, how I do things has changed dramatically since before the pandemic because I've had all these conversations, with all the guests that we've had on the show. And to be honest, also, conversations that, Nick and me have had on the show, when we didn't have a guest and we're talking about a particular subject, because it's always super interesting to get somebody else's take on something. I might have, there've been copious situations where I had a particular attitude at the beginning and then my attitude completely changed, by the end of it because of the input I got, by the end of the episode. So it's a really useful thing. Which is why I love listening to podcasts. I'm sure you're the same.
Yeah.
And
not just photography or design either. Like I said about watching TV shows, I like being recommended a podcast. I like football, so I listen to a couple of football ones, but I like listening to nature document. I like someone talking about nature or someone talking about something that's remotely interesting.
History podcast.
Yeah. True crime. Those kind of things, yeah.
Exactly. You're Dead to Me is an awesome podcast. It's a BBC podcast.
Oh, is it?
Super. Yeah, it's wicked. If you haven't checked it out, it's basically You're Dead to Me is like it's a history podcast, but they always have a comedian on the show as well.
Yeah.
So and they focus on particular aspects of history, like particular subjects. It's super interesting. They're not like overly long or anything.
Yeah.
But they're really entertaining. It's like that's the type of podcast I usually put on when I'm in the car.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's a quick 25-minute thing, hit about something that I had no idea about that happened in history. And I come out having learned something.
And it goes back to conversation skills. Oh, did you know? Hey, I heard the other day. It's all perfect.
Exactly. I had no idea there used to be this great empire in Africa back in the 14th century.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to have to go in a second because my daughters are going to bed. But one of the things that's happened this week that educated me was obviously, it's been a strange time in the UK with the Queen passing away. And I'm very much, but I like the Queen. My thing is the country was built on royalty. The country was built on a monarchy. Like it or not, every country in the world has done shitty things to get where they are. Every country has done something in their past that they wouldn't be proud of, but we are where we are today. And as long as they're not still doing it, then we're learning something. But I've trying to defend kind of why I buy into the royal family, why I have no objection to them. Yes, stuff's gone on in the royal family that's not great. It kind of also proves they're normal because they've had divorces and deaths and arrests and all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. But I've been watching some of the stuff about the whys and wherefores, like why everyone's going on, Charles, inheritance tax, he gets off it. There's a reason, and it's not him being a tax dodger. There's a reason why the inheritance tax isn't claimed. It's because of the way the stuff within the royal family is owned and of benefit to the government. So I learned about the Crown Estate and how how much money goes into the government and how much goes back to the royal family and why. And then I learned a little bit about the history today. Like I said to you off air, the reason why there was a German monarch was a religious thing way, way back. And I've been learning stuff about the royal family, the good, the bad and the ugly this week from people saying, rather than just spew hate on Twitter and just copy what everyone else is saying because you want to go, rah, burn the royal family, that actually there are reasons why some of the stuff happens. And the guy said, if you just educate yourself, your argument would carry more weight over like any subject. Don't just go in and go, Nikon's the worst camera in the world. Why? Oh, because I've got a Canon. So yeah, but why? What's the reason? What's your reasoning behind that? So I love learning about random stuff.
Yeah, I always think this, is like if shooting a particular brand of camera is what you think makes you a good photographer, you got a lot to learn.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, that's the...
I don't know, like we've been talking about Apple, and we've talked about Nikon, and we've talked about things, it's because it's for us. I don't, this goes back to good thing. I did a talk on stage at Creative South, and this is one of the things that came up was the human race has a difference of opinion. It's why we are who we are. So embrace the difference and make it a positive, rather than be hateful because I've just bought the new Canon. Well, why did you bother? I've just bought the new iPhone. Yeah, but the Android is better. For you. Just accept that I liked the things that I bought, and I use the equipment I like, and let's have the fact that we both love the reason why we buy stuff as our joining, rather than be hateful and spiteful, because for what?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, if you can create what you want to create with the equipment that you use, awesome. Ultimately, like we said in the beginning, nobody ultimately cares how you got there.
No.
Ultimately what counts is the product, the end result. If you create an amazing photograph, or you make an amazing film or something like that.
Yeah.
Nobody, you just look, take Hollywood movies, take some of your favorite movies.
Yeah.
Whatever it may be. Like,
what camera did they use?
Yeah, who cares?
Yeah, was it who cares if it was edited in Final Cut Pro or Premiere Pro?
Who gives a shit?
Print 10 amazing photographs out.
Yeah.
All right. In fact, I'll tell you what, anybody who comes to the photography show, and I will walk you round 10 images of my choice, okay? If you can tell me which camera and what settings and which software they were post-processed in over 10 photos, I'll give you 100 quid.
Absolutely.
You won't be able to do it unless you're the photographer that took them, and I picked the wrong person.
Exactly. Because I think as photographers or as creatives, we miss the point in that very often. We just don't understand that the only people who care about all that stuff is us. Nobody else gives a crap, and that's ultimately the thing. So, if you're happy shooting Panasonic or Sony, Canon or Nikon, if you shoot Nikon, well, it's great for me. We have a lot to talk about because I know. Yeah, because I shoot Nikon. Okay. But, do I love Canon less? No, they make awesome gear. So does Sony.
I just can't own all the cameras.
No, exactly. I have a soft spot for Fuji. I just think they look great. They feel great. They have this really cool retro look. They produce great images. Why do I not shoot Fuji then? Well, because I'm invested in the Nikon glass, and actually, Nikon cameras do exactly what I need them to do.
Invested. That's exactly it. I won't say Apple is better than Windows or Apple is better than PC. What I'll say is I've used Apple for 25 years, 20 years, full on, and the last 12 years, like deep. It's not that I think it's better than PC. It's what I'll tell you why I like Apple and why I like certain things and why it's great for my workflow. But that's not to say that what you use is worse. It's just different. And I love the ecosystem. One of the things I've always liked that I pay the premium for is I know that my phone, my computer, my laptop, and my tablet are all made by the same one single company. They're all made to work with each other in the same ecosystem. I can buy a handmade PC, a Huawei phone, a Lenovo laptop, something tablet, and for me, they just doesn't feel there's like a synchronization with them. So yeah, I pay a premium, but that's my money, not yours. I'm not spending your money on it.
Exactly.
I'm spending my money on it. So educate me. Tell me something about your phone that you love that maybe I don't have on my iPhone. Doesn't mean I'm going to throw my iPhone in the sea and go and buy an Android, but I'd like to know what better software is, because one of the things we fall under as Apple users is we get to watch Tim Cook stand on stage and say the most stupid phrase ever, which is, "This iPhone is the best iPhone we've ever made." Excuse the accent. This iPhone is the best iPhone we've ever made. Well, of course it is. Because it's the newest one. You're not going to stand up. Yeah, you're not going to stand up with the new iPhone 14. It's a little bit better than the 13, apart from. Yeah, exactly. It's always the best thing. But then when they say, you know, the camera's got this many megapixels or it does this, like I discovered something today in the photos. Remind me to tell you in a minute. But tell me something about your Android that's better than my iPhone for me to understand whether I need that feature. Or can I live without it?
Well,
I'm not.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. It's a great. I'm going to leave you with a tip because I'm going to have to go and say goodnight to my girls. Something I discovered on the iPhone iOS 16 today, which I'm sure every Android phone does, but I'd never seen it before, was if you've updated your iPhone 12, 13, because the 14's not out yet, open up the photos. There's a couple of features in there that for the photos that are really good. One, if you open up photos, don't go into an album, but scroll all the way to the bottom, you've now got a hidden folder that is activated by your Face ID. So if you, for whatever reason you want to hide any photos, you can, and it can only open with your Face ID. This isn't showing up on my iPhone 12, and it should do. You might be lucky and it shows up on yours. I think it's a glitch, but there's one called duplicate. And what it does is it analyzes your photo reel and because I do it all the time. I can't find an image. So I go on Instagram, take a screenshot because I can't find the image to use it again. So that's now a duplicate. If you can find it on your iPhone, it works. Click on duplicates and it will show you all the duplicates and then you can merge them. Or remove them, which is brilliant because that will reduce my thing massively. And the last one is find a photograph of somebody with the background, right? And just hold your finger, like say I had a picture of you right now and you had like the sea behind you. Put your finger on the person and just hold it for a second. And the software will cut the person out from the background, and if you just move your finger slightly, you can see the cutout. You'll get an option of copy or share, so you can do copy, then you can go into something else on your phone and paste, and you'll have a PNG background cutout of the person from your photo.
Ooh, I didn't know that.
It's that quick, and when you've done it, it's kind of little white line, like a light. Just keeps going round the cutout until you come away from the photo going, hey, look, we've selected it for you. Tell you what, it is clean. It is good. I'm sure there's apps on phones that do that, but the fact that it's part of the iPhone. So for photographers, apart from all the sexy camera stuff, yeah, I thought it was a really cool little thing in the iPhone. Brilliant. Love it.
Well, again, I come away from this episode having learned a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
Dave, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show again.
And you, mate. Thank you.
I am really looking forward to seeing you in a few days' time.
Yeah.
You know, so be reminded if you are, you know, if you weren't planning on going to the photography show, you know, make sure you drop by. It's, you know, you won't regret it. It's a fantastic event. It happens at the NEC in Birmingham, starting this Friday.
Saturday, Sunday.
Oh, Saturday.
Yes. Yeah, Saturday, Sunday, and Tuesday. And obviously closed all day Monday.
Closed on Monday. That's it. So yeah. So if you are, if you are at the show, come and say hello. You know, I'll be there. Dave's going to be there. You know, and it'd be amazing to to get to meet as many people as possible. And you know, even if you just want to mooch around, look at all the new things that are out there. You know, learn. There's so many master classes and stuff that are happening there. You guaranteed to learn a ton of stuff. It will make you a better photographer. But
yes.
Or it will make you a better person.
Yes, and just something for Kirsten and Nick. If you are a listener of Camera Shake Podcast, if you buy something at the show, or you have a great experience at the show based on what we've said, like you meet someone, either someone you admire or a brand new friend, contact Nick and Kirsten and tell them what and why. because I think it's important to hear that people have gone, and they have gone with a different frame of mind, and they have come away with something. Just drop them a note, just drop them an email on social media and say, hey, I went to the show. It was great to meet you. You're the best podcast in the world. And I got to meet this person, or I brought this bit of kit because, or I got this book because, and share that experience, because
That'd be fantastic.
it will be interesting.
Absolutely. You can get in touch on Instagram at Camera Shake. You can give us send us a message on TikTok, Facebook, join our Facebook group, Camera Shake Podcast, and, before I forget, make sure you listen to He Shoots, He Draws, podcast with none other than Dave Clayton and Alan Hess.
Yeah.
So some fantastic episodes are there. And you've hit 170, I think, something like that.
We're on 170. Another one's dropping tomorrow's Chase Jarvis, which is a replay episode for when his book came out, which is 174. And we're now closing in. By the end of the year, we'll hit it, but we're closing in on 300,000 downloads since day one.
Fantastic.
Which we don't hang our hat on the numbers, but when you hit a big number, I find it quite bizarre that not that many people listen, because people listen multiple times, but when you see a big number of people downloaded it, and you do the maths and go, well, 174 divided by, you see like your average. It's just nice to know people are still listening. So
yeah,
if you listen to our podcast, thank you. You get to listen to us waffle about stuff we love.
Exactly. So next week's episode will be all about the photography show, of course. So make sure you tune in for that. Again, if we don't see you at the show, make sure you tune in next week. Dave, again, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much, mate.
So yes, we have come to the end of Camera Shake podcast episode 120. So we're a little bit behind, but we are catching up. Anyway, so remember, if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, make sure you tune into YouTube, where you can see, both of our beautiful faces in full Technicolor, of course. Get in touch on Facebook, like I said, Instagram, TikTok, all the good stuff. And that's it. We'll see you next Thursday.
Bye.